And so it begins.
This is insane.
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
It's an excursion into the odd and into the very, very different.
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale. Good morning.
Quality, quantity, and variety.
ROCKFLUX.
Let's get this show on the road.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And here we are for another edition of Tony Caribbean Live, the morning show. It's 4:51 a.m. Eastern time. You know, I guess it's EST. I don't know. We set the clocks ahead next month. Today's the 16th of February. And it's a Wednesday, or hump day as some refer to it. An excuse to either drink, hump, or just spew some nonsense on a morning show. Hey, he laughs at his own jokes. Isn't that amazing?
Really funny. Really funny.
Okay. The title of this show is Who Are We? What Are We? Duality, Insanity? You know, I started a chat in search of. And as you can see, the title card, graphic, thumbnail, what have you, is the duality of man as our either primary or secondary title of this program. Broadcast, webcast, podcast, what have you, vlog. And this particular graphic was created literally within the last 10 minutes using just some special effects I have and me taking my glasses off for the photo on the left. It's more what I look like, minus the special effects. And the right side, well, that's just, you know, insanity. They took away a lot of the cool things. There's a program called Photo Booth that's built into Apple. You get it free with it. And it used to have like an extra page, and there was the ability with certain backgrounds. So if you had a green screen or any kind of solid background, just a solid wall, you just got out of the picture, snapped it so it knew what the background was. And then you could put yourself in front of like a waterfall or, have a roller coaster ride or something ridiculous like that. And I have no idea why they took that out, except for the fact that they must have included it in some kind of paid program or were paid to take it out. Apple's notorious for doing this. I mean, they did it back in the late 90s, early 2000s with when they did a radical change of iMovie. And they turned what was a beautiful program that had all kinds of really cool features, but they were so user-friendly, I mean, it's hard to describe. I mean, you literally just dropped a clip here. You were able to, edit your audio wave file in stereo, add, it was just incredible. And then suddenly, overnight, and they announced it. I mentioned this last year one time, but it bears repeating, like I always say. They changed it radically and presented it as this, oh, this is great, and you're going to love it. And what it did was, it was a prelude or an introduction to like Final Cut Pro, the program you purchase from them. And it was like as if it was a primer. They were getting you ready for that. And they just took away and abandoned this great program for the average user. And I had made a couple of music videos. I made one music video that, was actually broadcast on that original program. With ease, relative ease, where I had different scenes, where I had to pull audio out of scenes so that I was syncing, the song was playing continuously, but I was taking from a live broadcast or from different locations, and I had to think the guy singing the song perfectly and synced. It was that easy to use and user friendly and everything, and I can't, and they just did that. And they're notorious for doing that. And people think they improve the Macs with each operating system, and they're not. They're basically making them worse. They're making them more like children's toys. And Apple, like that Toy Story, which was, I believe they were behind that, Pixar or whatever that studio that they ended up buying, I think, or were in part, now Disney. I don't know if Disney bought that out completely or whatever, but they were partnered with Disney maybe at the time. I don't remember the exact financial, corporate, structural details. But they were involved in that kind of thing. And so, yeah, it's like, to me, Apple is Toy Story. And when they were smart enough to get rid of the word Apple computer and just call themselves Apple. Because they knew they were no longer a computer company. They were a toy company with apps and, all kinds of crazy stuff. It's like the changes they made to iTunes and now it's like that was bad enough when they started messing with it. And now it doesn't even really exist. It's like Apple Music, Apple TV. It's hard to believe. And so people who are born into this or get their first Mac, say within the past couple of years or something, or even this or last year, they have no idea what they're missing. It's like those who weren't on the internet in the 90s have no idea how cool it was. They have no idea that, like in Netscape, a program doesn't exist anymore, actually had a built-in, you could create a web page in Netscape. It had like a browser feature. And that even Microsoft's programs, because I used to use Microsoft's Mail, because they had an integrated program that were all of their programs in one, and one of them was their mail program was far superior to Apple's. But anyway, or this online mail and Google and all that stuff. I was on customer service with some guy from India, and this is nothing to be, I'm not to be degrading of an individual or anything. I could hardly understand the dude, and I was on for 2 hours yesterday because I had a Yahoo Mail account that I rarely use, but that I suddenly discovered was not working. I wasn't receiving mail from it. But I was paying for this thing because it's a complicated thing. I'm not going to get into it. It's personal, business-wise. And it took 2 hours, and I still don't know if today, I got it to work yesterday to receive some mail on it, but I still have to go through it and see if the stuff I'm missing is in there, and if I'll be able even to log on again today. That's the state of the internet today. Anyway, that's an introduction, to this show. I don't know what that has to do with the duality of man, but maybe some of the changes.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
Probably just a vlog. The vlog entry, 601. I'm pouring coffee when you see me do these weird things. I'm drinking coffee when you see my face disappear sometimes around the side. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. Anyway, so here we are, 5 a.m. Officially 5 a.m. What the heck's the temperature out? Like, I didn't even check. Today I'm planning to prune my plants, trees. According to the weather app on my desktop, the broadcast machine, it's 30 degrees outside. So it's just a little under freezing. And it's supposed to get up to 50 degrees today. And then tomorrow and Friday and into Saturday, it's either going to, Thursday's predicting to be like pretty much a rainy day, all day rain. But there might be snow on Saturday. I have a feeling it's going to rain more. I'm trying to put that way out of my mind because I don't want to get stressed out due to it. But today I'm hoping, and I wish I wasn't up so early. So the problem with getting up early is that the weather doesn't warm up until the afternoon. And I want to go out in the backyard and do this pruning. It's a project I've been putting off because there's been snow and ice on the ground. And it's virtually been impossible to do what I want to do. And I want to get it done. Tomorrow it's going to be 57. And I just don't want there to be some fluke week next month or something where, you know, these things bud or some sap starts coming up. See, the whole idea of trimming a tree, if you've ever want to know something about this, and I have to trim I also have some grapevines, is that you have to do that when the weather gets cold. What happens is all the sap goes down into the ground, into the roots, you see. And then when the weather gets warmer, the seasons change, then it starts coming up and out. And that's why people who do who make maple syrup, like up in Canada, you know, they work on that. And so they get the maple out of basically it's the sap out of the trees when that sap is rising. You see? A little bit of a general, I don't know, horticulture lesson, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. The duality of man. I have a lot to say about this. And this is kind of a serious conversation in a sense of, and for YouTubers should be, you know, quite aware of this topic as I get into it. I mean, I don't know anybody particular who's, you know, that I've watched who've addressed this, but I'm sure it's YouTube. There's 2 billion active users. There's got to be thousands of videos or hundreds of videos. I would imagine. I don't know. My motivation wasn't someone else. My motivation was myself. My motivation was in my personal journey of watching YouTube and going through life and trying to, pretty much ground myself and figure out what path I'm on. Also, you know, basically conceiving mortality, you know, having had health issues and still, like even today, I almost felt like going back to bed for a while. Like I was tired. And when I got up, I took my temperature to see if I had a fever. You know what I mean? I just felt like blah and out of it. I mean, I kind of feel okay right now, you know, but I'm drinking coffee and I just ate some cereal with blueberries and stuff. And some people might say, oh, it's your blood sugar. You know, I've heard that one before, and that's usually not the case. Because I don't have blood sugar problems. I just recently had a blood test and all that stuff. I don't have like type 2 diabetes or any of that stuff. And I eat a fairly, I wouldn't say fairly. I eat I have an exceptional diet, healthy diet. Exceptionally healthy diet. Like beyond what you would expect. And for the most part, my blood test results, that came back within the past several weeks, were pretty much almost textbook readings, you know. So it's like, you know, Bones on Star Trek, you know. Like I say, never let a good Star Trek reference go to waste, right? Hey Bones, what's up with the Tony Caravan guy's tests and stuff? I'm just a country doctor. What do I know? No, they're textbook readings. I think he might be somehow manufactured. I think he's not real. They're too perfect. They don't make sense. I know, it's goofy, it's geeky, but it's me. Right? Sometimes I used to do the old, when I would do something goofy like that, maybe a little more animated. That's the I Dream of Jeannie blink, by the way, when she used to put her arms out and make something happen, right? Missed it. There we go. All right.
After he's stalked, we must get rid of him immediately.
So, yeah. The duality of man. So yeah, I felt, I felt like crap, but you go for test. It's like I've been in the emergency room last year, not this year, knock on wood, like a couple of times. And both times, they ran a bunch of tests. I mean, in one time I did have some stuff whacked out. That's how I like this whole gallbladder thing. Why I'm partially eating the main motivation for this perfect diet. Though I've always tried to eat healthy, and I do grow that garden, and this will all make sense in a second. I do this in my backyard. Grow my own food and all that stuff in the summertime, and that's why I'm going to be pruning. Because I'm hoping to get apples this year. And I'm hoping to get grapes. But anyway, so, yeah, I eat these ridiculous leafy green, healthy salads with all kinds of, everything you're supposed to eat. And I even have, and I have all this paperwork and research I've done so that I get the right combination of vitamins and minerals. And like I said, my blood work usually comes out right in between the ranges that you would expect. One or two things occasionally might pop, push to the high side here or there, but there's usually a reason behind it, and it has been, and a retest, usually it's resolved. So that part I don't even understand. And this has nothing to do with the duality of man necessarily. This is just giving you a background on myself and how I came to this, why I want to talk about this topic, and how I got to this point where this is important to me. And so, despite all of that, I still find myself, facing this, facing the abyss. Whereas, 15 years ago, it wouldn't even have crossed my mind. Maybe not even 10 years. Yeah, 10 years ago, it wouldn't have crossed my mind. I'd have been sitting in an Irish pub, drinking, good Irish whiskey, and downing a bunch of beers, smoking a cigar, that kind of thing. And afterwards eating, food. I mean, good food, but, nothing necessarily on the list of my current diet. So in the past, I would say at least 60 plus days, the past 2 months plus, I haven't really deviated at all from a very healthy diet. And like yesterday, I was complaining about the FDA and the box labeling and sugars and all that stuff, and how they're poisoning us with all these, additives, preservatives, and, processed foods. And whether that's intentional or it just has to do with, easy profits. Like I say, everything the average person consumes, if it is processed more or less, is from corn. And even those who think they're buying organic food, like where it says organic or all natural, the idea is there's corn in there because corn is organic. Corn is natural. So high fructose corn syrup, I told the story 2 times. I'm not going to tell the entire story, but briefly, a name brand iced tea that says iced tea, green tea, the healthy stuff they tell you to have. Green tea with ginseng and honey is big labeling on the can and the box if you buy a 12-pack of it or something. And I think, and for years, people buy this stuff. It's still on the shelves. And because of this thing, because of my now being more noticing the labels, I was drinking it one morning, actually, during this show, and I showed it on a show, I think, the back of it at least. And I thought, well, I'd read the contents, how much, how is this really put together? What's in this thing? And if you are somebody who has a pet, they usually tell you that the first ingredient they list is the one that's predominant. Okay. I mean, there is some labeling, like there are certain parameters or certain, a certain threshold that you have to achieve in order to be, your label being approved by the FDA, but the threshold's very low. I'm almost wheezing a little bit today, but I don't think you could hear that. Well, the first ingredient was water. The next ingredient was high fructose corn syrup. And ingredients after that was like a derivation thereof, like another kind of fructose or, And it wasn't until you get down to the very bottom, of this long, and there were two or three, I don't want to exaggerate, 2 or 3 really long named, crazy things. Those things you see on labels sometimes. You're going, what the, right? There was a couple of those. And then underneath all of that stuff, right at the bottom, it said, and then extract of like green honey, ginseng, or green tea, ginseng, and honey. So basically what it was basically telling you is that you're drinking a can of high fructose corn syrup with artificial flavoring to make it taste more or less like green tea, but just so we can, not be sued or pass, the bar of the FDA. We're going to put a dropper of green tea, droppers full of ginseng and honey, which, honey is one of those really not regulated things. It's like I buy my honey online from a beekeeper, and I buy raw, unfiltered honey to make sure it's the real thing. Because they could say pure honey. The word pure is not regulated. Did you know that? Right? Because they consider pure, and like if you buy something that says maybe pure honey or pure something or other, they consider those two separate words. They don't have to have a comma separating them. So the pure could mean pure high fructose corn syrup, and the honey could just mean some, just some honey. I mean, it's not like honey. Honey in general is better for you than whatever. Pure honey is the ideal. You want 100% pure honey because you're hoping there isn't any high fructose corn syrup in there. But raw, and then you could get raw honey. I've bought that already. And then I found that the best is raw unfiltered honey. So you're getting the most that you can. I mean, the only thing better than that would be royal jelly, the stuff that the queen bee gets. Okay, enough of that. Enough of that lesson in, foods and things. Duality of man. So, but it was with purpose. So you reach this point where you become more conscious of your life, your mortality of living, and you start to think, well, what's it all about? The duality of man. And, where am I going? What happens after this? But the duality of man is not just in that. I don't want to just touch that in that way. In other words, mean the material, physical, the bioelectric brain, as I call it, the android body, as I described through like blood test and talking to Scotty or bones on the communicator, you know, whatever your blood tests are, that's one part of it. Okay. Man that created, you know, machine, right? The brain as this processing unit. There's a new chip, you know, that's being developed by a company. I'm trying to think of their name. It begins with an M. It's kind of based on our neural. It's more analog than digital. It's really strange, but it's one of the best chips out there. It's just going to be coming out in the next year. It was created particularly for AI. It uses way less watts, milliwatts or whatever. So it's much less power consumption, but way more processing power, like 10-fold, 100-fold, or something ridiculous like that. And the size is smaller. In other words, it like totally blows away the concept of Moore's law. This thing that's coming out by this company. And that's going to be a game changer. You know, it's funny, 2023 is poised to be a year of such technological development and things that appear on the market that it's going to be a mind blower. But at the same time, it's also poised to be a year, as I got into yesterday, of runaway inflation and just, I don't know, and may perhaps we may hit the Mad Max, scenario in many, many, many parts of the country and the world. All right. So we're talking about dystopia and high-end, tech breakthroughs that you can hardly conceive. I keep up on all that stuff. My book Codex talked about the hard problem of consciousness and has a little bit of a conversation with an AI in there that I had. So in one regard, the duality of man is this idea of the physical versus the spiritual being, the soul versus the corporeal body. The other idea is the obvious of like this image that I've kept on the screen, the thumbnail, title card, right? Tough guy, personality differences, the duality of man. Who are we? What are we? Right? The changes we go through, right? It's like that song by Shaka Khan or one of those people back in the 70s or 80s. I'm Every Woman. Remember that song? And people have done similar songs to that, right? And in different movies you've seen, particularly women, characters have taken on that like thing where they play that persona, like, where it's like they're the shy girl and then they're, the outgoing, like woman, heart, businesswoman, CEO, in charge type, right? You see that a lot. They take on a role. So that's a duality of man. And man does not mean man as in human, like in man as in macho man, it means human. So I'm not going to get caught up in this, this references things. We'll go with the time-proven stuff. You can't just change, you can't have like a handful of people who take on, and I'm not into politics, and I really don't care what people think and do and say. If you're on your trip and it's important to you, go for it. But it's not important to me. The point is, a handful of people who decide that you can't say this word or say that word or refer to a person as this, that, the other, and they're just Johnny or Janie come latelys, and suddenly think they're going to change something, references that have are age-old references. I'm sorry. We may adapt those things that you want us to adapt, but it's gonna it's going to take a couple, you're going to have to go through the process the way everyone else did. It takes a couple hundred years. Yeah, force feed somebody to change, change something. Mankind is mankind. That's just it is. All right. And most women scientists, anthropologists, and people of that type, they still are going to call it mankind. Trust me. It's too confusing otherwise. For at the very least, just for practicality and for science and for literature and writing a paper, publishing a paper in a journal, right? Have 1,000 parenthetical statements and asterisks every time you're trying to make a point. No, we're talking about man, the duality of man. That means women too. All right. So we have to review, because of that little thing, we have the duality of man, humans, being the corporeal versus the soul, the biological, bioelectric brain, androidish body versus consciousness. We have personality, right? The types, particular when we're in development, when we're in our teens, even into high school, where we're trying to decide role models, right? Choosing, who we were going to be. Like I once said, even adults, because we live in such a Peter Pan society, when that show Friends used to be popular, I talked about this once. I said, which character on Friends are you, right? So you would have these like 3 archetypes of women, and then the archetypes of man, right? And it's like, which one are you like? And then instead of art imitating life, life ended up imitating art. And that's kind of where we are now. But to call it art, it's not art. Say, imitating, TV, or the movies. Because there are hardly, how many artistes are there in the film and entertainment business today? Really, right? So the duality of man, and so I'm not so much concerned with the personality aspects that, we're constantly changing and constantly seeking the ideal, right? Because I've also spoken many times about the idea of, once you reach adulthood, it's, and I've used the example of high school since I mentioned that before. Sometimes during summer vacation, I remember myself, but this was true for most people. You had the opportunity over the summer to reinvent yourself. And so you would come back in the fall and you might dress different. You might have, a girl might have a different hairdo. A guy might be, taking on the characteristics of a particular role model and trying to develop and test out that personality, right? And sometimes it could be shot down by bullies or by really cruel people, because in high school, grade school and high school, people can be really cruel kids. But once you reach adulthood, if you ever do, like I say, we unfortunately do live in a Peter Pan society where you've got a lot of 30 and 40-year-olds running around and they're still acting like high school kids. That's a lot of this protest and politics and all this crazy stuff. He said, she said, right? And all that. Name calling each other and all this, thumb typing away on their Twitter accounts and stuff like that at somebody who happened to have a differing political or ideological, viewpoint. So what? Right? I mean, that's since the beginning of time. You go back, ancient times, particularly the Greeks and stuff, people argued over it. Make make your point. Don't get crazy about it, right? You see what I mean? Like you have to win. You know, politics has become a team sport, I always say. That's why I got out of it. It's like, you know, it's not a team sport. It's not anything. It's actually unnecessary. And I think the further you remove yourself from it, the better society would be. Anyway, be that as it may. The point is, you have the ability, once you get over a certain age, once you get out of those closed environs, those restricted environs of school, you can reinvent yourself any day you want to, right? All you got to do is go to the store, buy some new clothes, right? You know, and whatever. I could shave off this, you know, mustache and soul patch, and it's like the picture here of me without the glasses on, right? You know, I could decide I could be like a hard ass, like the guy on the right-hand side, and not smile and wear dark shades or something like that. Or I could be, you know, try to be a happy-go-lucky person, right? I could change jobs. I could do whatever I want to. You can do whatever you want to. So the duality of man, humans in that regard, yeah, that's up to you. You know, you're choosing something that you're, you know, more in the material world than in, you know, in the bigger scheme of things, right? Now, that's not to say that your consciousness or soul, if you will, that choosing to be some tough person, some mean person, as opposed to being a good person, a nice person, and doing good things, isn't good for your consciousness or your eternal soul, if you believe that, okay? And I do believe that. I do believe that consciousness is something like, if you read my book Codex, which, you know, I try to show you almost every show. Back here, Codex, that's the cover of it there. You'll see it at the end of the show when I put up the title card, or the closing credits, so to speak. But where I refer to the hard problem of consciousness, because even serious atheist scientists cannot have come up with a consensus or agreement where consciousness, the you of you, in other words, your personality in the first person, where that comes from. So you might not have ever thought about this kind of thing. The average person doesn't. You know, they just think, okay, brain, you know, that's my mind. No, that's not your mind. That's your brain. Your mind is your consciousness, is you. And you're using this brain and this body, and you've merged with this somehow in some way that's beyond. It's the unknowable. And science is working very hard because they don't like the unknowable. It's like Wall Street. They hate uncertainty, you know? So they want to know, right? Which really, in a sense, makes this whole thing here
Your papers, please.
so ridiculous. Because it flies in the face of science, because science is a constant search for the truth, right? Questioning everything, and so that they could come up with, you know, the ultimate, where there's a consensus of belief. And that you never shut out anyone who can poke a hole in your hypothesis, your ideas, let alone even your theory, because you want it to stand up. You know, that's the whole idea of science. But let's forget about that for a second. Well, period, for the rest of the show. So that's the question. So in regards to, you know, choosing a role model, a personality, who you are, right? You know, that's in the title. I have to reread my title, which is half hidden. Who are we? What are we? Duality, insanity, question mark, right? After all those things. So choosing who you are or what you're presenting to the rest of the world or to the people around you, it's your choice. And like I say, as an adult, you're free to, to change, alter, tweak that anytime you want to. You're free. That's freedom. That's why I always say freedom is a state of mind despite what's going on, out there. Okay? And, despite all of this, this idea where people, it's pretty crazy, but I'm going to enlarge this thing. Where I say resist media and politics up here. It's hard to get this thing to do what I want it to do. And the idea is that you can resist, that's up to you. And if you want to get caught up in media and politics, yeah, they'd love to have you on board with, with that whole game. So you don't have to follow the leader. You can be your own person. If someone, freedom, they can make all the mandates and rules and regulations they want to, as long as you work within the confines, of not breaking the law, the letter of the law in wherever you happen to live and how you live, you're free to do whatever you want to. These people who are on an ego trip and want to tell you how to live and what you should be, or want to homogenize society and not give you that freedom, well, that's their problem, not yours. You see? Because freedom is a state of mind, and you have control over your consciousness, your mind. They can, it's like they can control your body, restrict your body from being present at a certain place or entering a certain place, all right? But they can't tell you how to think. Now, that said, and I'm not going to expound on it, but there have been speeches and presentations made at Davos, which most people would know as the World Economic Forum, where people are presenting and they're working hard and there are patents already out on ways of altering and controlling people's minds and thoughts. And it is sci-fi and hard to believe as that might be to the average person. You forget it's the year 2022. And I say that some people who roll their eyes when I say that are usually people in their 20s or early 30s. Because to them, 2022 just happens to be a year, right, in their, in their young adulthood. But to anyone over the age of, say, 45 or so, the year 2022 is basically the future.
The future. He came from the future.
And so we see it in a different way than someone who was just born into this era. Just like I say, the obsession with the smartphone, for example, and apps. They've only been around for a decade and a half or so. So someone who's 20 years old by the time they were 5, and were, and had began to have access to this if they had parents who were giving them one of these things. To them, they know nothing else. It's a natural part of their life. But to someone who's 45, all right, they lived, 30, 35 years without these things, right? So they're not a part of their life, nor should they be, right? And the way I look at it is it's a tool, it's an interesting developed tool, and it's a tool that's on its way out. That's what, again, if, people have no idea, 2023, what's coming down the pike. This is the last year of the iPhone. I could pretty much say that with confidence. They're not going to be producing the iPhone as you know it anymore. And usually what happens is the other companies will follow suit. So we're about to enter into a new era of technology that most people are just simply not aware of. But this show isn't about technology. It's about the duality of mankind, human beings, all right? And so you can choose to be whomever you want to be, whatever personality you want to be. You can be a good person, a bad person, all right? There's nothing we can do about that. You know, governments and certain people can make laws. Parents, if there are kids out there, this show isn't really intended for children, right? You know, but the idea is, you know, authority figures in general can restrict people because people give, you know, either they are under, you know, the rule of that individual in some way, shape, or form, or they surrender their rights to that individual of sorts. Okay? So that's one thing. That's one way of looking at it. And you know, in many ways it's a good thing, this idea that I think not enough people realize that you are free to reinvent yourself anytime you want to. And some people are very frustrated. You don't have to be the thing that society or the people around you, or maybe at your last workplace, or the way you were treated in high school or in college or something like that, or your, you know, so-called friends or siblings or whomever tries to pigeonhole you into something. You could do whatever you want to. You could change any day. Tomorrow, today, this afternoon, you're a new person. You just go out there and, you know, and just be whatever you want to be, right? That's freedom, and freedom is a state of mind. Nobody could tell you how to think, right? They could, you know, that's why I say don't even watch the news, and that's what this resist media and politics is about, right? It's like resist it. You know, it's not resist, you know, fist in the air, resist the government or something. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying resist watching media getting caught up in politics. Politics is pop culture. Resist the media telling you what you should do and what they think the news is and what they think's important and so you should do that. And then resist watching television thinking that you have to be that person in the TV commercial. Dress like them, have that hairdo, right? Drive that car, right? Live in that type of neighborhood. And to where you become some kind of wage slave, even though you're making $80,000 a year or something, you know, or $100,000, because you're in this high rent, high mortgage, overpriced car, you know, everything, you know, you're trying to keep up with the Joneses, as they say. Well, you don't have to do that. You can live and be and drive whatever you want to. Be confident in yourself. Be confident in who you are, right? You know, that's the whole idea. The problem I have with these people who are caught up on names and they point fingers. That person said they didn't use the right pronoun or something, right? And it's like sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. You could call me whatever you want to. I don't care. I've been called names over the years. I've been called names as a child. Been called names as an adult. I've had people talk about me to my face, talk about me behind my back. I don't care. So what? You see what I mean? Freedom is a state of mind. Your personality is you. You decide. All right. Now, that's part one of this discussion. I mean, that's something that's, you know, it's helpful and it's obvious, but maybe not as obvious to most people. And maybe most people, you know, to some people that may be freeing. You know, that may be something that, you know, just hadn't crossed their mind before, you know, because they were so caught up in this crazy world of control and manipulation. And they think, oh, I have to be this way. I have to act this way. This is the way it is. This is life. No, it's not. So lose that. Forget the cult of personality. You don't have to, You don't have to be involved in politics in any way, shape, or form. Okay? No political leader is going to save you. I don't care who you believe, what ideology you are. You're not, that's just not the way it works. Doesn't work that way. There are controllers on top of controllers. I mean, I haven't done this in the past couple shows, but I've done it in practically every other show in the past month or two. The true marionettes are the media and politicians. That's why I'm saying resist media and politics, because the media and the politicians are just puppets of the corporatocracy, of the technocracy, whatever you want to call it, of the World Economic Forum, of those people. And then by you being, mesmerized by media and politicians, glued to the TV and just watching and consuming all this political blather, then you're like that girl in the black jumpsuit or whatever. You're becoming a puppet as well. So you're a puppet of the puppet, marionette of the marionette. It's obvious. And the thing to keep in mind about that is those people, that's all hypocrisy for profit. They don't care about you. Oh, they claim to have this moral standards, right? That's the big thing you hear on the media and from politicians. But their behavior doesn't conform to what, they're hypocrites. It's hypocrisy for profit. It's all pretense. So remember that. The media and politicians are puppets, marionettes. And by you being captivated by them, mesmerized, caught up in that world, then you're a puppet of a puppet. I mean, that's almost worse. The whole system's crazy. Freedom is a state of mind. Ignore the media, right? Resist media and politics. Okay? Freedom is a state of your mind. All right? And you don't know what you don't know. Like I say over here, you don't know what you don't know. And everything you know up there everything you know is wrong, practically. Okay, we got through that. And, and I think there was a lot said there. And if that is kind of talk is new to you, I advise you maybe to go back and watch that portion again. All right? And this portion may not be of interest to many people, because this, in some minds, this might be more on the woo-woo side. Okay? So when I talk about the duality of mankind, right, and just for the sake of it, womankind, whatever, all right, of human beings, right, Homo sapiens sapiens, right, bipedal creatures with a bioelectric brain, occupying these cities on this spinning globe, right? What are we? Who are we? Right? And where are we going? And as I started in the beginning saying that, as you get a little bit older and suddenly you realize that this ride you're on doesn't last forever. And there's all kinds of people out there working, in all these crazy companies like Alphabet and at MIT and throughout the world that are trying to create put plant man into machine, right? Transhumanism, they call it. Immortality into into some kind of machine, which basically, if the power goes out, so do you, right? It's my one thing that people don't think about. Even if you got, I advise everyone to get battery backup because our infrastructure stinks. And I have this great solar stuff thing you'll see at the end of the show. It's not just about solar power, but these battery backup things, right? Thingamajigs. I've got one back here. This thing here, you can hardly see it. It's fairly dark. It's this little device there. But that's what's powering this on-air light, right? And so if the power goes out, that on-air light stays on. If the power goes out, there's a plug on there. I could plug in another light and do things. And technically I could conceivably probably continue this broadcast because chances are the modem, if power backed up and the monitor backed up, you see what I mean? I could keep that thing flowing. But the point of the matter, if we have a CME and it's a grid down situation, it's all over. Our magnetic field is weakening, and we just saw what happened. Excuse me for moving around, but I have a very old chair, and it's very uncomfortable, and I've been trying to fix it, and I have one more fix in the works, and if that doesn't work, well, then it's just squirming, because I'm not buying a new chair. I have other priorities before that. So I don't put much faith in this idea of transhumanism, even if I did, believe that it was the right course. I think it's the wrong course. I think it's unrealistic. I think that the bioelectric brain, first of all, is way better processing unit than anything humans can create for hundreds of years, even these new chips I'm talking about. And apart from that is that you have a consciousness outside. So now we're into the other half of this show, okay? The other part of the duality of man, sort of the duality of the duality, all right? So I am, who I am. I have chosen to be this person, this persona for right now, right? And I think I'm pretty much who I am now. I've kind of come to grips with my personality, more or less. But like every other human being, I'm flawed. We're flawed. We're not perfect. I mean, there are some people out there that really got it super together, and I admire them. I really do. I admire those people. But it's like, no, I'm flawed. I still get angry at things. I still get frustrated at things. And when I catch myself becoming angry at this or frustrated with that, or maybe even depressed about something, I have to consciously, identify it. I'm better at doing that now. It took me a long time. I'm better at basically examining that and saying, hey, what are you getting worked up for? What are you worried about that for? Or catching myself being angry or, at something. And then I'm just like, just chill out, be cool, relax. All right. Don't be frustrated. Don't be depressed about something. You get, life is life and it throws you curves all the time. Deal with it, accept it, embrace it, and you see it as a challenge. These are my coping mechanisms that I've come to use, right? When I'm confronted with, the struggle of life, of existence, of human existence. And there are many struggles of life. And for some people, they just can't cope with it. And so they seek all sorts of, whether it's diversions or drugs or whatever, and the saddest part about it is if you look at the, causes of death in the U.S., you see a high suicide rate. But you also see high rates of people dying of things that basically are stress related. Stress has contributed to those illnesses, which ultimately killed them. So it's not only are people taking their lives, right, because society is not giving people, empowering people with the coping mechanisms they need to survive and letting them know, that, it's okay. We're all struggling and there's, don't let it, you can get through it. Freedom is a state of mind. You gotta just, it's the struggle of life and there are other things to do. But, there's a lot of lonely people out there. There's a lot of people who are unhappy. There's a lot of people who are experienced personal tragedies in their lives and things like that. And that in and upon itself is tragic. And so, you have, the first course of action is to seek psychological help, from a professional, psychiatric care. There's nothing wrong and no shame in that. If you can't cope with a thing, and if it's not a thing that you have some kind of friend or confidant that can help you work that out, then seek professional help. But life is a struggle, and we all go through these sorts of things in life. And so that's part one. And some of the things I'm talking about can be very frustrating and confusing to people, and do cause people to have, mental strife. And that is this idea of mortality and illnesses. When you're confronted with an illness, I've been confronted with a couple of illnesses over my life, and I've recovered from them. I've had operations, right? It sounds, like something I couldn't even dream of, even 10 years ago or so. Would be the last thing on my mind, that I would end up in a hospital, let alone a operating room. And then, but then you recover, and then that's it. And that's a part. As you get older, these things happen. Some people are fortunate, and they just get through their whole life and they never have these things. But for most people, something, happens, and you have to be prepared to deal with those things when those negative issues when they arise. But again, that's not the main focus of what I'm talking about. Health is something that I started this show talking about. Eat well, take care of this physical body that you're into, you're living, you're experiencing life with through these five senses, if you have all five senses operating. Not everyone does. Some people don't. So we're fortunate, those of us who do have the use of our five senses, those of us who have the use of our legs and arms and things like that as well, because many people don't, or don't have as good a use of them. And so that alone is something to ponder and consider and think about, when you're feeling down and out and saying, hey, at least I can see, at least I can hear, at least I can walk walk around my house. And other people can't, and that's just, some people don't want to say, well, they don't realize that. Yeah, well, when you can't do a thing, you realize, then you realize it. And you wouldn't wish that on anybody, but trust me, it's the same with when an illness strikes. You don't want, it's, you don't want to have some kind of debilitating illness. So when you have that debilitating illness, however, or when you reach a point where you see people around you, say you're the fortunate one that's not going to have that operation, that procedure, this, that, the other, okay? But you are suddenly aware a family member dies, or you watch a friend go through some sort of thing, right? People in the military, experience, horrific things, all right? And these are awakening experiences. I mean, they're horrific experiences, but they open up that idea of what I'm getting at is mortality, all right? That this ride, all right, that we're on doesn't last forever. And at any given time, we could be flung off that roller coaster, as horrible as that sounds. Okay? So I have a song, where I talk about one of my beat poetry tracks, which I've played in its entirety already. Again, I'm just trying to adjust this chair, which is pitiful. It's a 20-year-old chair. It's my original office chair. I should have just got another one while I was still working before I retired. And, now I have to struggle. I basically just have enough to get by. But I get by, and I'm okay with that. All right? I'm okay with that. So these are just the things I have to deal with. All right? Minor annoyances. Okay? It's not the end of the world that I've got to adjust this chair. It's a frustration, but on a minor level. So we are confronted with the big issues, but staring us ahead is the abyss. This idea of, like we talked about a couple of shows ago, which was kind of scary, and I'm not going to get into that, but the idea that this life will end as we know it. All right? And there are many different ways that people, conceive this, the end of life. Different religious beliefs, right? And even within people who are so-called atheists and stuff, they have different views of looking at it. And it doesn't really matter how or what you believe the end is, okay? That's unknowable. I can make a statement. I could present some ideas, some thoughts, based upon writings and ancient writings, and there are people who do all sorts of, who are more, the word clairvoyance is kind of a woo-woo word for some people, but I mean, there are some people that seem to be more in touch with what's outside of our bodies, more in touch with the conscious, the consciousness, as a, as a thing that is the part of the duality of man. So you understand. So that what I'm talking about here is, if you want to call it a soul, and if that particular soul or spirit, whatever you want to call it, because you have some sort of religious belief, that's fine. I don't want to get into that, because I'm not here to say I know. How would I know? The same thing, I might say, how do you know exactly what you believe? And you would say, well, I have faith, right? But this isn't a conversation about faith. All right? My feelings are, one, that I have no right to tell you what you should believe, and you have no right really to tell me what I believe. Okay? And the idea is, I'm talking about, stepping back from the specific belief, okay? And trying to find and looking at the commonality that we share, talking about our mortality. The idea that at some point this corporeal, material world life that we occupy, or that is, experiencing this world through these senses, whatever, at some point you're going to get something in your eye. Boy, it's like itchy. Eyelash. At some point, it's going to end. All right? And then what? And so in your, belief, some people's mythology, others' certainty, some people's best guess, they all have an idea or some preconceived notion, or maybe some half-conceived notion, idea, wish, hope, dream, that a certain, reality will exist, that they'll exist somewhere, in some other dimension, density, right? Heaven, all right? If you want, if you will, whatever. People have that, we have all of these things that people will believe. And again, I'm not here to say anything that any of your particular belief systems, I'm not here to talk about that because I'm not qualified to. I have no right to. I mean, I don't think anyone's qualified to. Okay? That's you. That's your mind. You've decided that. Like I say, freedom is a state of mind. You are free to think and believe whatever you want to do. Certainly a person like me or any person on the news, any politician, even any preacher, so to speak, right? Religious figure, cult of personality, all this nonsense that goes on. Everyone wants to tell you what to do, what to believe, how to act, where to go, what to do. All right? But ultimately, you are your own person. All right. So I'm not getting in there. I'm not going there. That's not my thing. I'm not talking about that. That's not what this discussion is. That's not the duality. The duality is that, we can agree to agree on certain things. And for those of us, even in science, who agree that there's the hard problem of consciousness, that they agree that there's this thing, consciousness, and then there's this bioelectric brain. So even in that sense, even though they might be atheists, they still have this idea that they can't put together the two. And where does consciousness rise in the first person out of this bioelectric brain in this, right, android-esque body? Okay? So it's almost universal among people who have, thinking, operating systems, okay? Whatever you want to call it. So we all, this duality of man is something that I would say the vast majority of people, there's some close to 8 billion people on the planet now, many of which have adopted certain religious beliefs in that regard. But the point is, I would say the majority of people on this planet believe in the duality of man. But the diversity, among those billions and billions of people is, is unbelievable, right? At one time there were, certain religious beliefs dominated, people. But even though there are dominant religions right now, people aren't that connected to their religion, you see? In other words, they're religion in name only, religious in name only. And you know what I'm talking about. So some of these so-called, they call them the great religions or whatever. But this isn't a religious study. This isn't a religious idea, what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the duality. I'm saying that no matter what you believe, where you come from, whatever, even if it's just a scientific idea, that there's this idea that there's this consciousness, this soul, this spirit that is detached from this physical body, right? And this bioelectric brain. And that your soul, your spirit, your consciousness is not that. And that when this thing switches off, what happens to this? And so we see our mortality when we reach that point. And again, the younger you are, these thoughts don't even arise, right? Who thinks about that? Not many. Some may, but not many. And so that's the question. And perhaps it's a question that should be pondered at a much earlier age, and that we should put more thought into. I mean, in reality, when you're a child, life is endless. They call it transcendence. A day in the life of a small child seems to last forever, right? But a day in the life of someone who's 90 some years old, goes by fairly quickly because they've had so many days that they've lived. I find getting up early, though, this is just a quick aside, getting up early, that my days last really long,
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
Be that as it may. So what is it? What's out there? This is me now, the morning show. It's my vlog. I'm just pondering this. So I believe that there's a separation. I've studied from a scientific standpoint the hard problem of consciousness, and I've come to the conclusion that the me, of me, me in the first person that I think I am, is my consciousness, and that consciousness is somehow attached to this corporeal, material body in this, existing in this realm, this world, this materialistic world. I'm open to the idea of different, what they call densities or dimensions or, levels of existence that are unknowable and beyond my comprehension. See, I can't come here and tell you anything with certainty because the unknowable is the unknowable. It's just like, it's the reason they call it the Big Bang Theory, right? It's because they don't know. When I say they, I mean we. We don't know. None of us know. These are the unknowables. It's like infinity, right? Some people, when they're confronted with the concept of infinity, they just like, it's like when a dog is confronted with, a human, operating a machine or a conversation among people. It just looks, and then it looks away because it just doesn't. It makes no sense to it. It can't comprehend it, so it doesn't bother wasting time. And so some people look at, ponder infinity for a second, and then okay, yeah, that exists. But really, when you think about infinity and you talk about mathematicians and physicists, there are some people who obsess with it, and they're just, working these things out on chalkboards and whiteboards and in computers and all of this stuff. It's actually mind-blowing, but it's unknowable, and we have come to accept that that's unknowable. Now, perhaps when we die, our consciousness reaches some point, the infinity will be something where we go, of course. Oh, how could I have been not seeing that? Right? Like sometimes when you discover, when you have some kind of, you're enlightened about some other thing, some earthly thing, and someone explains it to you and you go, oh, wow. Yeah, now I see what you're talking about. Well, those types of things that we are unknowable to us right now, eventually will become knowable. One would think, one would hope, right? I believe that would be my faith of sorts. But exactly what happens afterwards, we can only go through, looking back at ancient texts, writings, mystery schools, studies, and all of that stuff, including religions, in the things that we have been, taught or that have been laid down and presented to us over the millennia. And we don't know, we say the earth is like 4.5 billion years old. But we know some 12,000 years ago, 10 to 12,000 years ago, there was an Earth cataclysm. We know that we live in interglacial period, meaning that the Earth goes through these stages where it's frozen, and then there's these thaws. And during these thaws, that's when life seems to flourish. And we know we have these extinction events, at various times that we've found over the history, the long, deep time, we would call it, on the planet. Because it's inconceivable to a human being to really put in perspective saying some event that occurred 60 million years ago, right? Let alone 1 billion years ago. 1 billion years ago. We're lucky, like I say, the ideal, we should be living to be about 120 years old. It's really sad when you think about that. But between our lifestyle, the stress, the way our societies ended up being structured, the ruling system, and ultimately the food, you would think at the year 2022, we would be back up to living to be about 120 years. If you talk to, a healthcare, a medical professional, science, so actually a biologist, someone who deals with, the physiology, human physiology, on a level, a biological level, but like leaning towards the medical profession. Okay. Someone involved in research in those areas. They'll tell you, yeah, the human body could easily go 120 years. And then after that point, it's question on whether or not, with the current way we understand the breakdown of cells and this, that, the other, whether or not that's possible. And we have seen people live that long. We have seen people live close to that. There are many centenarians, meaning people who live 100, make it to 100. Many of them, relatively speaking, around the world. And I've talked about this before. They come from all walks of life, all races, all religions, all beliefs, all body types, body sizes, diets, all that stuff, crazy stuff. All right? People who eat ice cream every day. The oldest woman, French woman, the oldest woman on record, used to eat chocolate every day and sometimes have a cigarette and a glass of wine in the evening. You figure that out. She lived to be, I think, close to 120 something. I forget her exact age. I did a show and I wrote a essay of it in one of my earlier books. There are anecdotal stories of people living to be 160. There's even a story of a man who's supposedly a Chinese man, who's supposedly an herbalist, who lived to be in his mid to late 200s. All right. But who knows? But we can at least say that we know people, we should be living to 100 years old because many people do make it to 100. A lot of people make it into their 90s today, and they're still active. My mother's 88 years old, for example. She's not as active as some people, but there are many people in their 90s that are out there, doing things, right? Doing a lot of things. So they're not necessarily running a marathon. So, but I mean, that seems to be where we're capped off at this particular time. And obviously there's the reasons behind that, maybe partially genetic, partially diet, partially the way, one of the commonalities when these people who've studied centenarians, there have been like studies done by people. I've seen a documentary of where they interviewed, I think, 400 of them. And that's how I know that, what I'm talking about. I've seen another one where I think a larger study where they studied a global one of like 1,000 or more. And one of the things that they found that, when they were trying, the goal of the research was to find out what was the key to longevity. And the only thing that even came close to they having in common was that they were calm, that they were, the less stress. So, that expression stress kills, it's funny. It may be more truer than you think. But then again, that's just one study, and I'm just one guy relating to you a study. So who knows? We can't even say that with certainty, right? And that's how science is, you understand? And that's how things got warped today, because people want to believe people because they say a thing and because they seem to know something or they cite a particular study or studies. But the idea is that just because I said it, or just because I saw a study, or just because there's a documentary, and just because it's even a compelling documentary with hundreds of people or even thousands of subjects, right? It's still not necessarily something. It's just, it's just a hypothesis, right? It's just, we can infer some things from that, but we can't take it as fact. And so anyone who ever presents anything to you as fact just based upon a particular study or a statement, they have no, you can't put much faith in that. There are certain things that are just unknowable, and we will know them when we experience them ourselves. That's the thing. And I'll tell you, that's frustrating. It's very frustrating for me. For as much as I've researched my entire life about these kinds of things, I've always been fascinated about this stuff from a young age, because I've been into science fiction and stuff, and science fiction authors talk about all kinds of things like that. And so, but still, it's unknowable. I don't know. And, there's no reason to fear death, right? Because it happens to everybody. And if you believe that there's consciousness, right? If that is something, if you believe in a soul, like I say, regardless of your religious beliefs, whatever your ideology is, and even from a scientific standpoint, if you believe that the consciousness is separate from the brain, right? Then that should give you some comfort to know that, well, that thing survives. Or one would think it would survive, right? And so then you have all the religious and the mystics and the New Age, and then, and spiritual people and people who do, who study all kinds of things, read all kinds of things, and down through the ages, all the sages, right, have said, various things regarding afterlife, right? And you have near-death experience people, which has become a big thing, and that's big on YouTube. And you have all sorts of, people from mediums to clairvoyance to, you name it. There's somebody out there and groups of people out there that are going to tell you this and relate to you some kind of story. People who, you could go from Edgar Casey's readings, right? And people who are, hypnotized and talk about previous lives. And you know what I'm talking about. It could go on and on and on. And the idea here is not to criticize any of these things because it's all unknowable. And you could say, well, it says in the it's like you don't, that's okay. And if you believe that, and if you want to just accept the thing and you feel that you found the answer and that's it, and you don't even want to, well, you can shut this video off right now. Because I'm saying you may be right. Okay? I'm not here to criticize anybody or any ideology. I'm just posing a question. I'm talking about the duality of man. Okay? So in a sense, I'm agreeing with you because I'm saying we don't know, but this duality. And it's fascinating, right? No matter what it is, right? And when you ponder it, it just opens up, it just keeps opening up more doors, right? Or more avenues of thought, right? So even within religious groups, they have people called theologians, people that study their own belief systems, right? And that's what a theologian is. A theologian is not someone that doesn't believe in a religion. A theologian is someone that studies the religion deeply, really looks into it, right? And so that's all, that's the concept is universal, man's search for knowledge, to understand. We want to know. It's like we don't see it today because most of us live in cities where we can't see the stars. We could see the moon, and maybe we're lucky we could see Venus and a couple of stars here or there, on a very clear night or whatever. But most of it's usually obstructed by, the city lights and everything, street lights and stuff, what have you. But, we look and when you have that chance and you look out to the stars and you see that we're so small in this like cosmos, and you wonder, what is it? Who are we? What are we? Right? Where are we going? What is out there? Right? It's all fascinating things. These are interesting thoughts. We have these thoughts. Most of us. Some people don't. Some people just live. They don't even like you talking like this. They just want to say, just do my job, and that's that. I don't care. I don't care about that stuff. That's, that's that science fiction woo-woo stuff. And if you believe that, that's fine. It's okay. Everything's okay. No one no one has the right to tell you what is not okay or is okay, Believe what you want to be. Be free, But I could tell you one thing. It seems to me when I say resist media and politics and things like that, those people are trying to tell you what to believe or what, or do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. All right? And so, don't question, it's not, our society doesn't seem to want us to have open minds, open thought, question things. Right? And that's a troubling thing. It's troubling to me in the sense of health, well-being, right? I try to eat. Like I said, I eat probably one of the healthiest diets you could imagine. I could almost put out a book, and I'd thought about it, but it goes back to that idea that I don't want to tell people, like I'm some expert, because I'm not. I'm not a nutritionist. It's just what I've gleaned from my research, that seems to be universally agreed upon, but I can't say with certainty because I don't know, and certain things are unknowable, and my metabolism may be different than your metabolism. And when you throw genetics into it and other things, who knows? So the idea that I eat a good healthy salad with leafy greens and, a mixed bag of vegetables that contain all of the right vitamins and the right percentages that, are set forth in these various, per daily value percentages you should have in order to be healthy. Or when you go to a doctor, they say eat this, or you should make sure you have this vitamin, or if you were deficient in something. You could do that and hope for the best, but still, what works for you may not work for someone else. So I've avoided that. I tell people what I do, but like I say, freedom is a state of mind, and you're free to be and do whatever you want to do. And you should always remember that. Don't let any person, politician, some rule, some law, something, make you do something against your will. All right? And I'm not saying don't break any laws or anything like that. But I mean, you have to, it's like, not to bring up, it's too many, I hate even to bring it up, but it's like, the whole idea of the Nazis, I was just following orders. Do you see what I mean? There comes a point where you have to look at a thing and say, is that thing just? Right? So, in order to do something that goes against the laws, natural laws, morals and ethics, well, you see what I mean? That's where you come in, and your freedom is free, and you have to, those decisions are yours, and you have to be intelligent enough to make those decisions soundly. All right? Do no harm, like the medical professionals, have to take an oath to do no harm. Right? And so, that's almost an oath, that's a good thing. The question is, are they following that? Maybe the people who work at the FDA and these other places should take that same oath. Or perhaps they have, but they just have forgotten it. Like when I look at the cereal box, like I had on yesterday's thing, or with these people or when you look at a can that says green tea with ginseng and honey, and you look at it and find out it's mostly high fructose corn syrup. All right? And we know that these sugars are causing type 2 diabetes, and which ultimately causes early death and complications in people. But anyway, enough of that. I can't help get on these little asides.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
I just am who I am, and I'm just trying to be me and share my experience. This is my vlog, right? I'm trying to serve, do service to others instead of just being totally of service to self. Put it that way. That's it. And I think if more of us would do that, the world would be a better place to live in. So, what is it that comes after? That's the question. What comes after? And do we have, is our consciousness, soul or spirit, whatever you want to call it, can it intervene in our health and our well-being while we are still occupying these physical forms? People talk about, it's a weird word, but like a blackened soul. I mean, the idea is it is goodness, kindness, right? Is that does that make you healthy? Is that positive? I mean, we already know that it seems that the people who have lived the longest, or we believe we know, have been calm, right? And we know that doctors will warn you about stress. And you could see a person that gets, a person who has a weak heart, or problems with that, if they get involved and all worked up and stressful situation, they could have a heart attack, or they have chest pains or something like that, right? So, there are certain things that seem to be true, and that doctors, medical professionals will tell you that, will agree with that. Again, who knows? I'm not a medical professional. I've had doctors tell me things like that, So, but there appears to be this idea that goodness, kindness, peace of mind, less stress, getting less worked up, being happy, laughing, right? Joy, love, right? That 4-letter word that people don't speak much anymore. Happiness. That these things help us and help other people and comfort people, even when someone is ill. They comfort people. as opposed to the negative things. And there are so many of them that I don't even want to talk about it. But what you just have to look around today. Just look at social media. Look at all the pundits. People making fun of people, criticizing people, getting angry, you know? And even if they believe they have what they call the moral high ground in some cases, right? Where they're hell-bent on this thing and say, he said, she said, right? That thing. It's still presented in such a horrible way, an angry way, right? It's not a discussion. It's not, you know, a debate in a formal sense, a conversation. It's not like what I'm trying to do right now, where I'm trying to say, look, you're free to be whoever you are. You know, you could reinvent yourself anytime you want to. Freedom is a state of mind. Believe whatever you believe. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care whether you're whatever you are. It doesn't matter. All right. But there does seem to be something to that I feel, you know, confident enough to say that goodness seems to definitely have a positive effect on the world, on people, as opposed to evil and negativity, right? So positivity versus negativity. And you tell me, you look at what you're doing on, what you're watching on YouTube, what you're Rumble, what you're watching on, reading on Twitter, and what you're tweeting, or what you're posting here or posting there. And whether it's positive or it's negative, right? Whether it's presented in a case where someone may say a thing, like when I used to do Twitter, I don't really do it anymore. But what I used to do, I would present the actual research. If someone said something off the wall, I don't do this anymore. Okay, I used to. I'm out of politics now. I found it to be too, you know, absurd, ridiculous, insane. I don't believe politics should be pop culture. I think these kinds of discussions, I think, you know, the talk of health should be pop culture, right? Rather than, you know, like I was always annoyed when they said wash your hands and social distance and all that stuff. Because I go, yeah, I agree with you. Wash your hands. I always thought they should say blow your nose too, right? And I always was waiting for them to say, and eat these foods, be healthy, and do this. See, I think that should be pop culture, right? Teaching us to live better lives, right? You know, our life expectancy as a whole in the U.S. has been we've taken 2 years, almost 2 years off our life expectancy in the past couple of years. Well, that's insane. For the year 2022, for those of us who understand how far this is, you know?
The future. He came from the future.
I mean, you know, again, it's unbelievable to someone like me that in the year 2022, if you would have told me in the 80s, hey, wait till you see, by the year 2022, life expectancy is going to drop. There'll be like flus that last for a couple of years. People will be angry. They'll have all this great technology, but most of it will be used just to spew hatred at each other. People will be stressed out. There'll be high 2 million people a year will die of like heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and all these, diseases that are, if not curable, treatable. I'd say, nah, by 2022, man, it'll be like people will be living to be 120. It'll be like, it'll be a beautiful time, right? It's like the people in the 60s were like, they'll have flying cars and moving sidewalks. Like, who could believe just look around. And so if you find yourself, living negatively, or you find yourself surrounded by negativity, get out of that situation. And that's why I say resist media and politics, and why I reinforce it below, down, over here. Yeah. This screen is backwards from where I'm looking at. Where I say ignore the media. Cut the cord. Those people are just, it's all negativity. They're not, every now and then they have a human interest story. Here's a nice story of something that happened. And yeah, that's great. Somebody rescued a dog. Of course that's a beautiful story. Here's some older person who did yeah, that's great. That's great. We love it. Want more of it. Okay? And if that's what they were covering most of the time, it would be great. But instead, it's all ideological, and they're just beating the drumbeat for war. Russia, Russia, Russia. We got to go to Ukraine. The troops, all these people. Revenge of their political foes. Right? And all of these stories, these lies. And like I was saying before, when I would be confronted with a lie, I would do the research, and I would copy and paste a link to the actual story. And I don't mean the story, but the actual document. If someone would make some scientific, some statement, off the, out of the blue, to try to convince people about some absurd thing that was an outright lie. I wouldn't argue with them and say, you're wrong, and call them some kind of word or curse at them. No, I would say, no, that's incorrect. And if you go, here's a link to the actual, statement, or here's a link to the actual full length speech of the person, or here's a link to the medical journal paper, or here's a link to the scientific paper that you see what I mean? There are positive ways and there are negative ways. But this name calling, finger pointing, and this obsession with negativity is just bringing us down. And it's just going to destroy you. It's going to destroy you, and it's going to ultimately take a toll on you and make you ill. And so maybe perhaps part of the reason why I try to do some of this positivity is to save my own eternal soul. You see? To keep my spirit positive. All right? To make myself hopefully a more healthy individual. Right? So, in a sense, that's a little selfish. But, I still think the idea of service to others as opposed to service to self, as long as the service to others outweighs service to self, I mean, you have to take care of yourself, right? In a world today, it's almost impossible to be a total, to just throw away your possessions and put on a pair of sandals and walk, the desert. We can't do that, right? We would just die. That would be suicide, literally. There were times in history where you could live without possessions and you could hike, and just get a walking stick and hike through Europe and, stand on a stone or a place and, make a speech. And maybe people would throw stones at you, or maybe people would listen to you and you could move on. Or you could just get a temporary job, do some work, and to the people you're working with, speak good words, kind words, and talk about some ideas and move to the next town and do stuff like that. There were times when you could probably do things like that. Not probably, you could. But today, in this techno world of the cost of living is outrageous, So the idea is that, think positive, do positive, be positive, avoid the negativity. If you're surrounded by negative people, detach yourself from those negative people. They're bringing you down. And if you're watching the news and social media, because all media, the media landscape now is all media. Twitter's the news, right? Apple, if you have an Apple iPhone, there's a news app on there, right? Android, everything's the news. It's all over the internet. right? It's not just TV, newspapers, and radio anymore, right? So all that, just avoid that stuff. You know, there's interesting things. I mean, I think this is an interesting show. It's an interesting discussion. There's no definite conclusions here to be made. I guess I haven't totally enlightened you in any specific thing. Some of my shows I have. And, you know, before it's all said and done, I'm not going to do this forever. But, you know, there'll be some shows where I get into some enlightened things. I've also had shows where I was an angry man, right? Because I'm a human guy and I criticized something and I went off on a rant, you know, and I can't say I'll never do that again. You know, these things happen. I'm only human. You're only human and you're forgiven. You know, that's another thing. You're forgiven. If no one's ever told you that, you know, if you've made some mistakes in life, you're forgiven. You know, you're just human. Don't let it bear down on your spirit, your soul, right? You know, just do better, right? Think positive. You know, make up for it. Do a good deed, you know, and live life that way. And maybe that's the takeaway. The takeaway is you're forgiven. Live in a positive world, not a negative world. Get rid of the negativity, all right? And maybe that's the duality of man, is like the positive and the negative. It gets back to this image that I created, you know, 5 or 10 minutes before I went on the show. I just snapped 2 pictures using these special effects. One guy on the left seems to be like, I don't know, semi-relaxed and, you know, just semi-smiling and at peace. And the other guy on the right seems like mean. Now, don't try to draw color into that either. That's just an X-ray effect, all right? And the idea was that I wanted the sunglasses effect. I didn't have the ability. It's not like the skin color or something. It's me, okay? All right? You know, you have to justify and clarify everything today because people want to take things in such a negative way. No, the idea is being as opposed to happy, positive, or negative. Don't be negative. Don't live in the negative world. And if you've had negative aspects in your life, all right, or you've done things that you regretted, you said something, you criticized somebody, you did something, well, you know, tell them you're sorry and you're forgiven. And if you can't say you're sorry, if that person's no longer around or on the other side of the country or whatever, just you're forgiven. You made a mistake. You're a human. You're only human. That's it. Anyway, so be happy. Be happy. That's the main thing. And I hope you have a great day. And I hope I'm able to. Look at the sun coming up. If you look up in the up there at the camera too, you can see that glow on the top of those buildings. And it's particularly towards the one closest to the on-air sign. That's the east down there. And so that's where like the sun is just starting to shine off the roof or in the background. But anyway.
Good morning.
I'm going to be doing pruning today outside, and I hope it does get up to 50 and it doesn't rain today. I don't care if it rains tomorrow. But thanks for watching. My website's ROCKFLUX.com. That's the one you want to remember. I'm also on Rumble. Mastodon is something called associated with Podcasting Index. You could check that out if you want to. There's links to everything on my ROCKFLUX.com website, which, as I keep saying every day, I will be improving. Also, don't forget you can listen to my music everywhere. And if you go on YouTube and you search Tony Caravan Beat Poetry, you'll find like 50 tracks. I guarantee there's something in there you'll like. And the great solar stuff is not just solar things. There's power backup. So if there's a power outage, because this is a rough winter, you'll have power backups. And of course, I've got 10 books, and these 2 books are my most recent ones. I recommend you get the print versions of them. I believe Then What is on Amazon right now for only $9.95. I'm sorry for selling stuff, but and the shirts, hoodies, and hats, and stickers and bags, all that stuff, you could find a link to that, my store on rockflux.com. Thanks for watching or listening. Cheers.